Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil. Kind of continuing our series, picking back up on return on your investment. We're going to be looking at when to stop relics today. What relic levels make sense for you? When do you equip more? When is enough enough? I'm going to give you guys kind of my framework of how you can view each of these different relic levels and what makes sense for your account, particularly when you're in those earlier stages of the game. You need to be very much aware of what each relic level kind of means, and I'm going to hopefully break that out for you. So please like and subscribe, comment down below, give me your thoughts. Thank you guys to my channel members. You all are fantastic, continuing to support me through thick, thin, good, bad. I love you guys so much. It is so appreciated. Let's get into our video, and hopefully this helps you work out your relics. Alright guys, so let's start off with the easiest stuff. Your requirements. A lot of characters in the game are required, whether it's for a Journey Guide character or Rise of the Empire operations, there's a certain relic level that they are required at. The thing you're going to do here is take them to the point that they are required. So, Relic 9's for Leviathan. You know, hey, I needed a Relic 5 Ugnaught for this operations, or I needed Relic 7 for their special mission. You can add more relics to these characters. Look at my Leia and Cal Kestis. Both of them are higher relic characters, have more gear than what they actually are required for in the Journey Guide. We will cover this later, but there are certain characters where, due to their purpose or performance, you may want them to be higher relic levels. But when you're actually going through that Journey Guide event, when you're actually moving through it, you want to keep those characters at their desired relic level and save the rest until you get to the end of your journey. One of the big mistakes I've oftentimes seen, particularly with certain GLs like maybe Jabba, is I've seen players who take their Leia and Skiffguard Lando and Cursantins to Relic 7, Relic 8, and then they don't have enough relic materials to finish off the requirements for Jabba, and then they get stuck, and then they unlock Jabba, and they don't have the signal data to relic him up because it went to these characters that they put these luxury relics on they didn't need. So take your time, get through the Journey Guide first, get the Galactic Legend, put your relics on them, and then you can figure out if you want additional relics on those characters. So I did want to call that out now, and we'll talk more about how to identify that later. The next category of, hey, I'm going to increase relics comes down to raids. Now for the raids, instead of sitting here and saying, I'm going to get 5 teams to Relic 7 and that's that, ask yourself, what score do you want to hit? What score do you realistically want to hit in the raid? So if your guild is, for my guild, for example, our goal is to hit the, 416 million box, right? That's our goal. So I need to score over 8 million points. I forget what the exact number is, like 8.3. So as you guys can see, last time I scored 9.1. So realistically, I am done. I went above and beyond what I really needed. Now, part of that simply came from the Queen Amidala team, where I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to take Padawan Obi-Wan and Master Qui-Gon to Relic 9 for the Duel of the Fates. I may as well just take Queen Amidala to Relic 9 to boost the raid score up, help my guild out a little bit more. But I could have kept her at Relic 8, and realistically, my guild would not have noticed that much of a difference in our rewards. I'm scoring more points than I should, but you wouldn't really notice too much of a difference, but it was a decision I wanted to make just to help my guild out a little bit more and not be as selfish. But don't sit there and say, I'm going to get Gungans to Relic 9 for the raid, and then you realize that your guild, and then you have all these other teams, and you're scoring a crazy amount of points, which is great. But if your guild only needed you to score, 5, 6 million points, what are you doing, right? So big time, just, hey, be focused on, think about the score you want to hit and not necessarily individual teams. That's my advice there, right? So that can be a little ambiguous, but just think about it that way, that what score do you want? All right, so then we're going to break it down into your performance type characters, right? From the performance perspective, there's 3 categories you can kind of fit teams into. That when you think of relics, you think of the team, and there's certain aspects that we can call them out as. So the first category will be key -1, core matching, and full matching. Those are kind of the 3 categories that I use. And so to describe each one, right? Key -2. This means that there is a key character on the team. That one character is kind of the key to the entire success. That without that character, that team is going to struggle or it's not going to perform its desired outcome. So think about like the Supreme Leader Kylo Ren First Order team. He is the key, right? Extra relics on the rest of those characters help, but really it's the relics on Kylo that make a difference, that you want him to be the, the creme de la creme. You want him to have those relics because he's your damage, he's the galactic legend. So you can kind of use this as saying, okay, whatever relic level I have Kylo at, the rest of the team should on average be 2 relic levels lower than him. So if your Supreme Leader Kylo Ren is relic 9, the rest of the team can be somewhere in that, should be in that relic 7 range. Because you don't want to go too low. You don't want to have this relic 9 character with a bunch of relic 5s. Because then what happens is it gets very easy to exploit the relic 9 character because the rest of the team isn't there to support them. They still need their supporting cast. Their supporting cast just don't need quite as many relics as they do. So you can kind of go with this key -2 for Kylo, and Jedi Master Luke would also be a galactic legend who fits there. I am just going to say, when you're starting out and you're in the early parts of the game, this is where every galactic legend will fall into, is key -2. That every GL will start out at relic 7 in your account. That should be the bare minimum. And honestly, for a while, that should be your maximum too, like relic 7 and then stop. So the rest of the team can be in that relic 5 range and you'll be fine, right? For some GLs, that's a much easier thing to do because, maybe the characters for them are required at higher relic levels, like Leia with Drogon and R2-D2, Jabba with Leia, Skiffguard Lando, and Chrysanthemum come out at relic 5. If you're farming Jedi Master Luke, Jedi Knight Luke comes out at relic 7. So some of them have higher relic requirements as part of, their journey. Other times you may need to build some relic 5 characters for that team to work. Think of like Jedi Master Kenobi. You're going to have to build Snips, Commander Tano, and Padme up to relic 5 to kind of make that team fit into this key -2. So all GLs will start in this key -2, and then they can kind of move down into these other categories depending on the team, and we'll give a few examples. But also characters like Starkiller and General Skywalker fit here, where they're the key to that team. Starkiller is the key to his Emperor Palpatine Mara Jade team. So if you're looking at, hey, where do I relic the rest of the team? Wherever you're going to take Starkiller, you can take everybody else to about 2 relic levels below that, and you're going to be fine, right? That you don't need to have them all at the same relic level because Starkiller's the key. Without him, the team doesn't work. Similarly with General Skywalker, you don't need everybody on that team at the same relic level, but you don't want them to be too low. You need them to be able to support the relics on your General Skywalker. If your clones are too low, it gets very easy to pick that team apart when General Skywalker is kneeling, when he's not taunting. So even though your General Skywalker could be relic 7, if your clones are only relic 3 or relic 1 or gear 12, the relic 7 on your General Skywalker isn't as big of a threat. You're not really getting a return on it because they're not able to really support him. And then finally, I've got Fennec here as kind of that Lord Vader counter team. You can keep the rest of that team about 2 relic levels lower than Fennec. Now, this does get exacerbated. That relic difference will become a problem if there's Datacrons involved or you're going up against a much higher relic Lord Vader team. That if the whole team is relic 9, your relic 7 Fennec probably not going to cut it. So just keep that in mind, but that's key -2. Core matching is my way of kind of saying, hey, there's there's a core to that team, that there's certain characters that are always there, that you're never, think about Leia, Drogon and R2-D2. With Jabba, it's Chrysanthemum and Leia. With Queen Amidala, Pastor Qui-Gon, Padawan Obi-Wan. With Malicos, you're looking at Seer and either Cal or, somebody, right? And then Boss Nass, you're always going to have Jar Jar there, and then you're going to have somebody else. Core matching says there's a certain characters that are always in that team, that no matter what you're doing, they're always there. And in this case, you're going to want to work on the relics on the core, right? That the core of that team can be higher relic levels, and everybody else you can kind of count as, lower at times. An example you could think of here is the Leia team. You can have relic 8 on Drogon, relic 8 on Leia, relic 8 R2, and then maybe relic 5s on the rest of those rebels. And you're still in decent shape. The core of that team is what matters, especially when you break it down into 3v3. Queen Amidala, same thing. The Malicos team, again, the big threats are the ones you want to equip those relic levels onto. And then everybody else, not that they don't want relics, but they can kind of fit more into that -2 category. That you don't want a relic 1 Fulcrum Ahsoka Tano in that team, but you don't need a Relic 7 with a Relic 7 Terran Malicos for GAC. And then similarly with your Gungans, you want your core of them to maybe be higher Relic levels. And then the other two, hey, you know what? They're there, but Jar Jar's the big threat. Or, Boss Nass is the leader. Those kind of things. And then finally, you're going to get to what I call the full matching. And this kind of says that, yes, maybe there is a core to that team or the team that you're going to use the most. But without every member of that team, they're going to struggle. So one of the big ones here is Commander Luke. Yes, in 3v3, you'll split off Han and Chewie, and then you'll use Chewpio, C-3PO, and Luke. But you can't really say that there's one, you take one member of that team out, and very quickly it can fall apart, right? I've also got Darth Traya here, and a lot of you are going to say, oh, Darth Traya fits into core matching. You don't need Scion and Talon. Sure, when the GAC Omicrons are there, but what happens in every other game mode when you don't have those Omicrons? Then you do need those guys there. So, with Traya, you kind of want them all to be the same Relic level because that way you can't exploit that one weak character. When you're in 5v5 and if you have a weak Talon or a weak Scion, you can pick apart that team and make it much easier to focus down on the ones that are going to prove a bigger threat. I also put Inquisitors here, and this is kind of my way of saying that if you're thinking, hey, what would benefit my account more? Taking Reva from Relic 7 to Relic 9 or taking Reva and, say, Grand Inquisitor to Relic 8? I'd take them both to Relic 8. That team kind of benefits from there not being a weak link. When there's a weak link, it becomes very easy to pick that team apart and whittle them down piece by piece. Right? So you want them all to kind of be that same Relic level, and that way they can kind of survive together and they all pose that equal threat. The Trench team fits here, and so does Kenobi's, where when there's a weak link for one of these teams, it can be very devastating to your account. And with the CLS team, a lot of you are like, what are you talking about? So think about when you're going for Jedi Master Luke. The requirement for Jedi Knight Luke is a Relic 3 Commander Luke. But then Chewbacca, 3PO and Chewie, C-3PO, and Han Solo are all required at Relic 5 or Relic 6 for Jedi Master Luke. So now you have this Relic 3 CLS with at least Relic 5s on everyone else. It doesn't really help you, right? Like that Relic 3 makes him a much easier target and makes that team a lot weaker. Now, when I say full matching, that doesn't mean take the full team to Relic 6. Just bump Luke up to Relic 5. You basically just want everyone to be around in that same region, that you don't necessarily need them all to be the same Relic level all the time, but just don't go crazy. You don't want to see big gaps on a team like this. One Relic level is fine. Getting into that 2 Relic level difference, that's where you want to maybe avoid it because you're starting to get into that weak link, in my personal opinion. So that's the first kind of way to think about teams is, are they a key, a core, or full matching? So then you have to ask yourself, well, what's the purpose and performance of that team? What am I trying to do with whatever team I am building, right? Am I trying to do, counters? Am I just trying to have a solid team? Like, what's the goal? So this is where the Relic tiers come into play. So for Relic 3, I call it general counters. That your stopping point at Relic 3 means I'm just trying to beat the stuff that they should beat. I'm not trying to do anything crazy. I'm not trying to go, hard and destroy something crazy. I'm just, hey, they need to beat what they should be able to beat. Relic 3 is your stopping point then. For a lot of you in the early parts of the game, this is where you want to be. You just want to be able to do those general counters. You don't need your, the example I would use is you don't need a Relic 7 Imperial Trooper team to counter Lord Vader. You just need your Imperial Troopers to be able to beat, those bounty hunters or something. Relic 5 is when you start getting into some of those tougher counters, when you're going to start asking some bigger questions of that team. So for the Traya team here, I would argue about Inquisitors. Obviously, Datacrons can play a role, but like this team without Datacrons, I take them in a Grand Arena, and they're going to be able to compete against Reva Inquisitors. That's kind of the thought process with this team, right? That they're capable of beating those tough counters. That you're not shooting for the moon. It's a tougher team, but it's not impossible. That's where Relic 5 is your stopping point. Until you're much later in the game, this is the area you need to rely on, right? You want to stick to this Relic 3, Relic 5, and save the rest for your journey guides, right? One lesson I've learned in Grand Arena over the years: save your big teams for your big battles. When you're in that earlier part of the game, one of the biggest areas I've seen players lose grand arenas in is they rely on these, we'll call it top tier counters or trophy hunting teams. And then they end up losing because they don't have enough of the teams built to handle these mediocre things, right? That you don't know how to beat Mon Mothma, Iden, and General Grievous on defense. But hey, I've got my, Star Killer beating Rey, or I've got Gungans beating, Reva or whatever it is, right? I'm doing that, but you can't do some of the more basic stuff because you've invested your relics here instead of trying to build a bunch of general counters. So then you get to Relic 7 and Relic 8, and this is what I call your top tier counters and trophy hunting. Relic 7s are going to be required when it's like, yeah, you know what? We're trying to pull off some crazy things. You're trying to beat your Galactic Legends, trying to beat those teams. You need those Relic 7s, that you're trying to pull off some of that top tier stuff. It's not, I don't want to say it's not screenshot worthy, but you're not going to be bragging like crazy, but you're pulling off some of those big things. Relic 8s and Relic 9s, you're going trophy hunting. That if you're doing that, you're trying to do some crazy things. That you want your Queen Amidala team to be beating Leia, or you're trying to get Bane to tackle some big stuff, or, my Wampa, like at Relic 8, I can tell you that I beat Star Killer in 3v3 regularly, depending on again, Datacron's kind of playing a role in if I actually see a Star Killer, but you're going trophy hunting at that point, that you are going for those big punch-ups and you're investing those resources to make that happen. So, in my opinion, you want to stay away from these until you're at the point in the game when equipping relics will not handicap your next farm. And by handicapping your next farm, what I would kind of use, and I'll use my current example right now. In the journey guide, I'm going to be going after GL Ahsoka. So I have my Snips who needs to be Relic 9. When you look at my impulse detectors, error magnifiers, and if I was to go over to, say, General Skywalker and my Gerda keypads, I have plenty of these left over even after I went ahead and did my, Queen Amidala, Master Qui-Gon, Padawan Obi-Wan to Relic 9. So I'm not really handicapped by the fact that I'll need to make up those resources because I've got them already. Now, who knows? Maybe there's more Relic 9s coming and I'll be handicapped and I have to, renege on this. But for a lot of you, what would happen is if you go do those big relics, you're going to need to spend your resources, whether it's, your guild currency or, guild event currency. You're going to have to spend those resources rebuilding those resources. You're going to spend your currency, and get back to the place you were so that you can complete your next farm. If that's the situation you're in, I would hold off on Relic 8s and Relic 9s. You want to save those and wait for when it won't handicap you. And the other side of this to just consider as well as the signal data, that if you go and equip a Relic 9, you're looking at having spent, instead of a Relic 7, you're spending an extra 100 blue signal data. Do you really have the stomach to spend an extra 100 blue signal data? For some Galactic Legends, they only need about 300 blue signal data. So spending 100 of it on a single character that you don't need at Relic 9, that's a big investment. So hopefully this helps you guys understand when to equip your relics and kind of how to think of them from that, hey, once you're in the performance side, how do you know where to stop? Hopefully this framework that I provided for you helps. And again, if you're in that mid part of the game, you're in the earlier stages, you want to stick to this Relic 3 and Relic 5 stuff. You don't want to be these top tier counters, as nice and as cool as they look. If you can't be consistent with them, you're better off just using a Galactic Legend. I have seen so many players lose grand arenas because they don't have enough teams to beat general counters. I myself have fit into this category where, I can beat you if you've got, 8 GLs on defense, but you put, 12 teams down that require me to use a tough counter, and I don't have it, and I had to build that. So just want you guys to kind of keep that in the back of your heads. Let me know your thoughts. I love you all. May the Force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.